field of psychology in the United States. And according to him, there are two sides of the self, the me self and the I self. And now let's take a look at his perspective and how do these two differ with each other. According to William James, the I self is the subjective self that is aware of its own actions. So it's describing yourself using the word I or from your own perspective. It's the I from within, okay, describing yourself using your own perspective. Okay, so what are the features of the I self? So if you use the I self, you're capable of the following. So the first one is that the I self gives you a sense of being the agent or initiator of behavior. So let's compare that with the me self. Say, for example, choosing a course in college. Let's compare the I self and the me self. So the me self may say something like, my parents want me to study this course. But when you use the I self, you would say that I really want to study this course. So now, if you use the I self, you have the responsibility over your own behavior. You realize that you're the one who make choices and others are not the one who's going to make choices for you. So with the I self, you realize that we are capable of making choices for our own lives and that we are responsible over these choices instead of saying that your choice is the product of other people's choices. Next, the I self gives you a feeling of being unique. So the I self gives you the capability to say that unlike other people, I am blank. I like math. I like studying. I like reading books. Unlike other people who are, who have negative attitudes towards a certain profession, I think that they are not that bad. Okay, unlike other people, I think, I feel, I believe. So that's the I self. Other than that, the I self gives a sense of continuity. So it allows you to have one continuous identity. So when we say continuity, you know that the self doesn't change. Who you are yesterday is still who you are now. It doesn't mean that you don't evolve, but rather, it doesn't mean that you have a new identity every day. Okay? With a sense of continuity, you have the capability to remember what happened in the past and connect them with what's happening in the present. For example, you have the capability of saying that I remember that yesterday I did this, that's why now I'm doing this. I remember that when I was a child, I was taught by my parents that I must be respectful to adults. That's why right now I am being respectful to adults. And that's about being continuous from the past to the present. We should also have a sense of awareness. So when we say a sense of awareness, the I self is capable of telling where he is, who he is, and what is the time. Okay, he is aware. Is it morning? Is it afternoon? Is it the night? So if you're aware, what do you feel? What do you think? Okay, are you conscious about what you're doing? Okay, so that's one capability of the I self. Okay, because sometimes when we rely so much on me self, you just behave in a way that other people want you to behave. So typically we redirect the thinking of our clients by saying that, for you, what do you think? That's what they think, right? But in your own perspective, okay, what can you say about this or that? Okay, so that is for the I self. Now let's talk about the me self. The me self is the self that is an object or the self that you can describe. So this is from the perspective of others or the more objective self. Okay, so according to William James, there are three perspectives of the me self. The first one can be the material. Okay, so they think of me as smart, they think of me as handsome, they think of me as helpful, okay, as they think of me as fit. Okay, okay, so that's the material self. Okay, and next is the social self. They think of me as friendly. They think of me as someone who knows how to behave well in social situations. They think of me as a helpful individual. And lastly, we also have the spiritual self, or describing yourself when it comes to personality, character, and values. Okay, so that's the I self and the me self. So be conscious. How does your me self differ in comparison with your I self? Okay, and which is more helpful to you? Sometimes we have to strike a balance between behaving in a way that others want us to behave, and behaving in a way that we think would be the best for us. Okay? Now let's shift to another perspective, and this time let's take a look at humanistic psychology. So humanism is one of the perspectives in psychology which is a bit similar to philosophy because it has philosophical roots. So humanism emphasizes the active role of the individual in shaping their internal and external worlds. Okay? And one of the most important humanists would be Carl Rogers. Okay? And Carl Rogers believed that the person is an active being who lives in the present. So, according to Rogers, you don't live in the past or you don't live in the future, but rather what's important is that you live in the present, because there are other theories who would emphasize the importance of the past. For example, Sigmund Freud would say that you behave like that because of your childhood, but Rogers is more likely to bring you to the present. Is more likely to make you realize that you have choices, even though you were taught of something. If you were behaving in some way because that's how you were in childhood, Rogers would emphasize that you have the capability to change. Rogers coined the term actualizing tendency, or one's capability to reach his or her highest potential. So I guess you're familiar with self-actualization, and maybe you're familiar with the theory of Abraham Maslow. Okay, both Maslow and Rogers are humanists because they do believe that people have the capability to actualize. Okay? So, if Maslow was very popular with his hierarchy of needs, okay? And Rogers is popular for what we call the person-centered theory. So, let's talk about his perspective. So, Carl Rogers' person-centered theory believe in the following concept. The first one is the ideal self, or you have the capability of thinking who or what you want to be. So people may say things like, I want to be a good musician, I want to be a good engineer, I want to be a good psychologist. So that is your ideal self. And you also have what we call a real self, or who you actually are. Not all the time our real self will match with our ideal self. Okay, say for example, what if your parents are forcing you to study a certain course, but you don't really want to study that course? Say for example, what if your parents are telling you to become a doctor? They are trying to change your ideal self, but your real self says that you actually want to pursue a career in another field. Say for example, what if you actually want to become a teacher?